Hello, and welcome to the eSchool News webcast. My name's Andrew Barber. I'm a senior contributing editor here at eSchool News, and I'm delighted that you could join us for today's presentation, which is sponsored by Kronos. And as I'm sure you're all too well aware, tracking and reporting on child nutrition and federal programs can be a real challenge for schools. And so over the next hour, we're going to hear from district leaders about how they can use automation to track and report on special activities like supplemental pay, and also how they meet compliance requirements. And before I hand things over to our moderator today, I do want to just take a couple of moments to highlight a couple of items about our presentation. First, we are recording the event, and in a couple of days, you'll receive an email from us that will include a link to the event, and you'll also be able to download a PDF of the presentation slides from that same email. And second, please ask questions. Don't feel as if you have to wait until the end. At any point during the presentation, if you have a question, simply type it into the Q&A box on your console and hit the submit button. And we'll definitely have some time at the end when our panelists and speakers can address your questions. We also have a chat function which you can launch. If you look down at the bottom of the screen, you can see the blue group chat icon down there. If you click on that, it launches the chat, and you can use the chat to talk among yourselves or to contact me or the eSchool News team if you have any technical problems or any other issues during the course of the presentation. But I do have one favor to ask of you. Please don't use the chat function to ask the panelists questions. They simply aren't going to have time during their presentation to monitor those chats. So if you have a question for them, please use the Q&A panel instead. And with that out of the way, I'm going to hand you over to Rob Tibbs, who will be our moderator for today's discussion. And Rob will, in turn, introduce you to today's panelists. And just as some background, Rob is the K-12 industry consultant and subject matter expert at Kronos. And before joining the company, Rob worked as the director of payroll at Jefferson County School District in Alabama. That's a district with some 6,000 full-time and part-time employees. And while he was there, he successfully transitioned the schools from a completely manual, paper-based management system to an automated one. Welcome, Rob. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew, and thank you all for joining. So as we kick things off, as Andrew mentioned, we're here today to talk about special activities, reporting, and tracking labor in your school district. We know that billions of dollars in financial assistance are allocated to school districts across the U.S. each year, specifically in child nutrition and federal programs. And we know with the much-needed physical support comes the added responsibility of tracking and reporting back on how those dollars are spent. So as we go through the presentation today, we want to talk about that specifically and how you can account for those tangible items in a straightforward way, but be able to track the labor that supports these special activities, which we know in a lot of cases can be very cumbersome. So having the ability to tie the work time back to the correct funding source is ultimately the goal at the end of the day to ensure compliance requirements and reporting, and also in the end ensuring that you secure funding for the next fiscal year, etc. So that's our topic. That's kind of a summation of why we're here today. Today we're going to hear from two school districts as they discuss their approaches to tracking and reporting on special activities, such as supplemental pay, extra duty pay, and how they have automated that through the Kronos solution. Our first speaker is Sonja Anthony. Sonja is the Director of Child Nutrition for Jefferson County Schools. She oversees the day-to-day operations of the Child Nutrition Department, ensuring a little over 30,000 students get fed each day. Some specific responsibilities and programs under her direction are school breakfast and lunch, catering events, summer feeding, after-school snack programs, and at-risk dinner programs. Thanks, Sonja, for being here.
Thank you, and good afternoon.
Our second speaker is Jonathan Bailey from Wicomico County Public Schools in Maryland. Jonathan currently serves as the accounting supervisor for the district, ensuring all funding is accounted for and utilized in an appropriate manner. As part of his role as the accounting supervisor, he manages the federal dollars that come through their district, ensuring that it's allocated appropriately and reported on appropriately. So again, Jonathan, thanks for being here today.
Sure thing, thanks.
So today's agenda, we have 4 main topics that we're going to cover underneath our special activities reporting and tracking labor. First, federal funding in the schools. So what funding sources do Jefferson and Wicomico utilize within their school district and allocate for labor? Second topic is accountability and transparency, and why that's important and how the district has leveraged the utilization of Chronos to help with that. Third topic is manual versus automated, just talking about the advantages of moving to an automated system, as well as some of the other things to consider as you migrate and the advantages. And lastly, we'll end on reporting and auditing and speak to how we're able to assist with that and hear from both Jonathan and Sonja on how they do that. So that's our agenda. As Andrew said, please feel free to put questions in as we come across them. We may not be able to get to all of them, but we will for sure follow up with all the questions that are asked. So if we kick things off and hit on federal funding, we all know school districts balance budgets leveraging special funding sources all the time. We know the districts receive state dollars, local dollars, but at the end of the day, the federal dollars definitely help balance budgets and secure the necessary personnel, as well as additional technology items and other things for school districts. We know these federal funding sources come from a variety of locations, whether it be federal funding, grants, and other revenue streams. So our first topic of the day is around funding types. What all funding types are used for tracking labor, whether it be primary positions, such as your child nutrition employees that come in and day out, or it could be supplemental type positions where you've got a teacher that's paid out of the general fund for their teaching job, but it could mean they're doing some after school care tutoring that's paid out of a federal fund. And so we're going to hear from the districts here in just a minute as it relates to that. So why are federal programs so important? Across the U.S. in our school districts, approximately 10% of school district budgets are made up of federal dollars. Of course, heavily utilized in child nutrition programs are federally funded. We see school districts all the time allocate additional FTEs utilizing federal dollars, whether it be teaching units utilizing Title I funds or other uses there. And then again, like I mentioned earlier, it provides additional funding for additional much-needed programs, whether it be at-risk programs or after-school care programs, such that definitely help the kids. So as we think about that, we'll start with Jonathan from Wicomico Public Schools. Jonathan, can you speak to the funding types that are allocated for labor and special activities within your district?
Absolutely. Wicomico County Public Schools receives federal, state, and local funding, mostly in the form of awarded grants. Each of these can have full-time equivalent or benefited positions, as well as contractual or hourly non-benefited positions. Most important are the federal grants, which we receive through pass-through from our State Department of Education. We're the subrecipient. And they're most important, obviously, because of the vast compliance issues that come with accepting those dollars. The largest federal grants we receive, I suspect many districts are the same, are Title I Part A and our IDEA grants. They're the largest total dollars for us, and also they're the largest in terms of expenditures for FTE and non-FTE expenditures and budget.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm sure most of you utilize the same, but I think it's good to hear from other districts as far as what funding streams they utilize and how they allocate them. So Jonathan spoke to a variety of funding types that are utilized. Now I'd like to hear from Sonja Anthony and her perspective from a child nutrition director. Sonja, can you tell us what funding types you leverage for special activities that may run through your program?
Well, our special activities center around, obviously, our biggest program, which is the National School Lunch Program. We are federally funded via USDA, so there is a great deal of ideas that we need to look at as it relates to labor expenditures, because that also overall affects our budget as well. But because we run multiple programs under our header, in addition to the National School Lunch Program, we have the At-Risk Dinner Program, we have summer feeding programs, and all of these come from different venues through the federal government through reimbursement. And our biggest bunch of money, for lack of a better word, is for the reimbursable meals that we receive. In addition to that, we also have commodity allocations for those students that we serve every day. In Jefferson County, we average roughly about 10,800 breakfasts a day and 28,500 lunches a day. So when you look at the reimbursement rate, there is a great deal of funding that comes through USDA.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. So to close out topic one, of course, we heard from Jefferson, Wicomico. I'm sure a lot of you are very similar, but given that 80% or more of district budgets are made up of labor, it's definitely beneficial for different districts to leverage other funding streams to allocate special activities, again, to reduce general fund spend, but still provide the much needed attention and programs to the students. So thanks, Jonathan and Sonja, for sharing that. As we transition to our second topic, which ties directly to the funding streams and the federal dollars that we talked about, I wanted to hit on accountability and transparency. So when we think about that, it's definitely at the forefront of a lot of districts' minds today. As we've heard already, there's different funding streams and different opportunities for districts to leverage these funds, but when you leverage these special funding, it's important to, number one, spend wisely, but it's also important to have a process in place to account for the federal funding, as it's crucial for future funding as well as audit and reporting purposes, which, ties to full transparency, etc. And as we look, as Andrew mentioned, I came from a school district in Alabama. Now that I have come on board with Kronos, I've had the opportunity to travel across the country meeting with various school districts, small, large, and everything in between. All in all, districts across the country are still leveraging some sort of paper or manual process as it relates to tracking labor. So having an automated system helps ensure accountability and transparency. So when we think about that, just to give you an example, I have this paper timesheet that I'm sure if you're on a paper-based type timekeeping process or system, this would look familiar. You have employees that are needing to allocate their time for their primary job, like we have here, 8 to 3, 8 to 4, 8 to 4:30, etc. But then you have the same employee maybe working outside of that job. In this example, they're taking up tickets at a ball game on Monday. They're working the after-school care program on Thursday. So you have all that happening on top of their normal paraprofessional job. And, of course, those extra activities need to be charged to different accounts. They earn comp time on their primary job. They went into an overtime situation that we need to ensure gets allocated to the appropriate funding source. so that they get comp time in their primary job, but extra pay in their other job. We know that it needs to have different approvals, et cetera. So as you can imagine, if you're on a system like this, and this was a similar approach to what we had prior to Kronos, it's very manual, very time-consuming to manually calculate the time, ensure you have the proper accounting attached and the proper approvals in place. So what happens in an automated environment like our Kronos for K-12 solution, employees are able to allocate their time in, time out on a daily basis as they work. As they work in supplemental type jobs that we've been referring to, whether it be tutoring where you're using Title I funds, or whether it's one of Sonja's after-school care or snack program, they're able to allocate the labor just by simply transferring to that. All the time is collected on one time card. It's automatically calculated. The overtime is automatically allocated appropriately. They automatically get comp time in the primary, and it automatically routes the appropriate people for approval. So I just kind of wanted to give you a visualization as to what that looks like. So, Jonathan, can you tell us about your transition from manual to automation and how that benefited your school district from an accountability and transparency perspective?
Sure thing. First and foremost, compliance that's required by accepting restricted funding is not an option, right? And the salaries and wages and the time and effort represented by those expenditures charged to federal grants has the potential to be a high-risk area for a lot of districts in terms of findings from audit and monitoring. The audits we face, like I'm sure many of the districts on the line, the so-called single audit, now governed by 2 CFR 200, or otherwise known as uniform guidance. We also receive quite a bit of monitoring from individual programs that they review similar items that our independent financial auditors do. Having a process for charging these salaries and wages mitigates the risk that I just said. Furthermore, having the process is great and essential, but being able to demonstrate this process to auditors and monitors really becomes more than just icing on the cake when me and my staff are being asked the tough questions by these auditors. Now, this process I'm talking about, in a general sense, must address two things right from the law. Salaries and wages, or any expenditure for that matter, charged to a federal program must be necessary and reasonable for the performance of the award. Also, it needs to be allocable to the grant. So what Kronos does for us is ensure allocability first and foremost, and also through a workflow approval process, gets everyone on the hook, or otherwise in the loop, whichever the difference may be. It gets everyone aware of and approving anything salaries and wages related, whether FTE charged in the beginning of the year or hourly special projects throughout the year. It lets everyone know and approve what's going to hit that grant, and that's essential.
Thanks for sharing, and I can attest to the sentiment that Jonathan has described in our district. We were faced with those tough type questions, whether it be an audit or an actual lawsuit type situation, and having a manual paper-based approach makes it very difficult to defend and explain to someone like that, whereas if you have a defined process, as Jonathan described, it makes it a whole lot easier to defend and I guess justify your expenditures in the way you did things. So thanks for sharing, Jonathan. So when we think about accountability and transparency, as we've already hit on heavily, compliance ties into the equation. So we want to ensure that we're not only compliant with district policies and procedures. So that was huge for us. when you think about, all districts have policies and procedures in place, but when you have a manual, paper-based process, how can you, without a doubt, ensure that those are being adhered to day in and day out when there's so many hands that touch it and it's such a manual process? So I think that is something else to think about as you look at accountability and transparency is ensuring that you are compliant with your district policies and procedures, but also you've got FLSA, FMLA, and ACA on top of that from a compliance perspective. And then, as we've talked about, there are requirements around federal funding and grants where there's tracking and reporting or requirements around that. So a lot going on, and I think it's important to think about accountability and transparency. But if I kind of switch to Sonja now, as the district-wide child nutrition director, can you speak to some of the challenges you faced before and after your implementation of Kronos?
Well, one of the things we experienced, obviously, was inaccuracies in reporting time when we were on the manual timesheets. When you would see consistencies in the time always being exactly the same, 7:30 to 2:30, 7:30 to 2:30 every day, but knowing that in some specific schools there were some issues with having to work a little bit later because we had issues within the school, utility issues or whatever the case may be, those were not always reflected on those timesheets. And that was just the first trigger to see that you don't always come at the exact same time and leave at the exact same time. There's going to be a minute here, a minute there, knowingly. We had people before going to Kronos, that we were being informed that they were being told to work off the clock. Well, obviously, that is not acceptable in any entity, not necessarily just child nutrition. So that was one of our concerns, or the flagrant abuse of time, reporting time when you in fact were not there. So there were a lot of things that we were able to discern once we moved to the automated system, and that was of grave concern. And I can talk of one instance where there was an issue brought to our attention about the flagrant abuse of misstating time that led us to another situation, because many of our time clocks throughout our school district are being monitored with a camera to make sure that Rob is not signing in for Sonja Anthony. So we have to watch that as well, and unfortunately we experienced that in one of our facilities where we observed that one of our management team was actually signing in for someone else. Well, that led to other issues down the road for us and for that particular employee, but it has given us more compliance and ability to monitor as opposed to what we were doing with timesheets. Timesheets were also very difficult for us to tell people, where are your timesheets? They were never putting them in the same location. We tried to put a dedicated location because a timesheet was a document that should be private and should not be laying around everywhere. Whereas with the automated system, each employee has their own individual identification number, and of course they will record their time accordingly. In some of our sites, some of our employees are able to receive comp time. We were able to monitor that far better than we would have with the manual system. And in addition to the automated system, it allows us to allocate those labor hours accordingly, time-wise and monetary or dollar-wise, to the respective programs. And what I mean by that is we are responsible as a federal program for National School Lunch, School Breakfast, at-risk, summer feeding, but we're not responsible for paying for any catering functions outside of that area or outside of their arena, or whenever our employees are working in another entity. Some of our staff members actually work in other parts of the school after hours, such as the after-school care for the daycare program. That is not an expenditure, labor-wise, that child nutrition could absorb, but we're able to differentiate that with the time cards or the automated system by being able to allocate those hours to that GL or to that entity who will be responsible for paying for those labor hours. So it has been most helpful to allow us to account for actual time and actual venues for which that employee is working.
Great. Thanks, Sonja. So as you've heard, accountability and transparency are important when dealing not only federal funds, while that's our focus today, but really a lot of what Jonathan and Sonja has shared carries across the board to your whole school district. It's just even more critical from a federal perspective. So tracking those funds appropriately and allocating the labor is critical to ensure compliance. As Sonja mentioned, you get what we call pencil whipping, where it's 8 to 3, 8 to 3, 8 to 3 every day, but we know there's no possible way that they're actually working that. And when we think of supplemental pay and after-school care activities where most employees are paid by the hour for that, those little chunks of time can add up. So we've seen on top of this, when you incorporate being more accountable and being more transparent with your time, we've actually seen districts be able to save dollars because no longer do you see that pencil whipping, but you see actual time that they're working. It may just be 15 minutes or 20, 30 minutes here or there, but over a school year times the number of employees that we have working in a school district and the number of supplemental activities that go on, whether it be child nutrition or whether it be enrichment programs or athletic programs. There's always something going on outside the school day, and so we know that can add up. So we've seen districts save significantly there. So thanks, both of you, again, for sharing that. So we move into our third topic, manual versus automation. We've hit on that a little bit already. We know, and I mentioned before, school districts across the country are slow to move to a more advanced automated timekeeping system. Manual paper processes exist in every school district, whether it be across the board or mixed in with automation. So, you may have some level of automation through spreadsheets or through some type of system, but at the end of the day, it's not an end-to-end automation. So, third topic is manual versus automation, and kind of wanted to hear from the group around that. But before we do that, I just kind of wanted to jump in and expand a little on what we've already talked about around tracking that supplemental pay to those special funding sources. When we think about that, it's not just about the employee and their ability to allocate the time, but there's also requirements typically with certain funding sources or district policies and procedures that require multi-levels of approval. So, for example, if a teacher is doing tutoring at a school and you're using Title I funds or some special grant fund, in most cases, that person overseeing that federal program or that grant needs to have visibility into that. And so when you think of paper, you think about, are you having to scan it and email it? Are you having to fax it? Are you having to send it through interoffice mail for them to review it, acknowledge it, and place a general ledger accounting number to it? All those things are occurring. So when you think about that, I think it's important to note around the tracking and approving of that. So if you see here, we've got a timesheet where they've worked their primary job, but also they've worked in Title I and done tutoring on 2 particular days after school. When we think about that, it's almost like you want to slice the time card out. So we've got our first approver that is approving the regular time on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then we've got the other part of the day where the tutoring is, where we want a different approver to approve it. Because at the end of the day, they could be working at a different school doing this after-school care program. Their main principal really can't authorize or approve it. And then, of course, as I mentioned, if it's a special funding source, someone else may need to approve it. So when you think about our solution, it is able to splice out the time accordingly so that it automatically routes and by the end of the pay period has all the necessary approvals on it. So with that, we'll start with Jonathan. Tracking labor tied to federal dollars in real time as we've discussed, can be very valuable. This allows for, real-time visibility, as we mentioned, no pencil whipping, as well as real-time allocation so that you can monitor budgets and make sure you stay within budget. So, Jonathan, can you speak to your experience with automation and how you automated your processes as it relates to the federal dollars and supplemental pay and such that we've discussed?
Absolutely. As seen on Rob's slides, Kronos makes it pretty simple, keeps it pretty simple. There's fields within Kronos that accept our GL account numbers and also the corresponding descriptions, either of the account numbers themselves or another relevant description, like that might tie to a cost objective, which becomes pretty important to auditors. Our account numbers in Wicomico use logic within them such that certain figures, certain digits correspond to individual restricted grants within our special revenue fund. The descriptions that we put in Kronos can and really should tie to approved budget narratives that reference these cost objectives. So you can kind of see it all aligns. Budget narrative approved by the funder or pass-through entity, our GL account, and then eventually reporting. Rob and I have touched on the workflow, which makes it so great. A lot of times accounting can, from our programmatic friends, that can be finances thing. But with the approval and routing that to specific people, it brings everyone to the discussion and approval. So automation not only makes the process convenient, but as Rob has referenced, it's more timely. My general ledger at any given point is no more than one pay period behind, and that's only for our contractual hourly folks. The FTEs are to the day current, or to the pay period current. Now, if I have to, I can go and feel quite comfortable going to Kronos and getting up to the minute contractual hourly data. But as it's currently set up, because payroll needs appropriate time to process and such, the GL is never more than 2 weeks away from being accurate, and that's really powerful. From a budget to actual standpoint, we're getting near. Lord knows we're getting near year end, having to project remaining balances to make the decisions, harder decisions. Kronos really gives us the data we need to make the decisions when their salaries and wages and budget actual are concerned.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. So if we shift gears to child nutrition now, we all know that child nutrition programs are required to not only provide services during the school day, but we've spoke a lot about things that they're doing outside of the school day and even a lot of times during the summer. So their day doesn't end when they finish breakfast and finish lunch. We know that it continues well after that as well as through the summer. So tracking that time can be cumbersome and very labor intensive, as Sonja has already alluded to. So Sonja in Jefferson, she was able to collaboratively work with the finance department to establish new procedures during the transformation that they had in Jefferson to automation. So Sonja, can you speak to your experience of the automation and what things you changed within child nutrition as a result of that?
Well, previously, before we became automated, manual timesheets were maintained at the local school, and the cafeteria manager, in conjunction with the administrator, basically conducted approvals with those, and there probably were quite a few things that slipped through the cracks as it related to overtime, comp time, etc. That transitioned over to our central office, child nutrition, in which we are basically responsible for monitoring time, monitoring labor hours, monitoring if there are any issues relevant to overextension of leave time because we're able to see that in real-time data. We work closely with our payroll department to give us some basically consolidated data for us to be able to review. And it's also allowed us to transition. We can see the transition from one program to the next. And if there is perhaps a flag, so to speak, on an employee's time, then that's something we would be able to question, particularly if we know that there should not have been any other event after their dedicated or contracted time schedule. And what I mean by that, if I see an employee that shows a time outside of their standard contractual day, then that is flagged, and that's when I will do my due diligence in researching with the administrator and or the cafeteria manager as to why was this employee here at this certain time of day, what were they doing. Sometimes it may have been simply they worked in the concession stand after hours. That's what they do. Well, then that's when I will get in conjunction with the administrator and payroll to make sure that that is not taken out of the federal funds as we relate to the meal service aspect of it under our jurisdiction. It also allows us, our IT department worked with us to give us mobile apps that would allow us, when we have training sessions, because they must clock in and clock out, obviously to have 320 plus employees trying to clock in at a certain time for a training session would be impossible unless we had multiple clocks, and of course that's not financially feasible. Therefore, our IT division worked with us in turning some of our tablets as well as some of our line machines into dedicated Cronus time clocks when we have to flip that switch, for lack of a better word, to allow them to clock in for different venues when there are so many of them involved. So it has been very beneficial to us for us to be able to monitor the time and for us to be able to monitor what is actually allocated or dedicated to the federal program versus non-federal entities. So it's been very helpful in that regard.
Great. Thanks, Sonja. And I can definitely speak to the fact that as I have traveled meeting with different districts to speak to their processes and things, I can't tell you how many times this exact topic came up where they say, you know, who monitors and who approves child nutrition time, because at the end of the day, on paper, it's difficult because they're spread out all at the different school locations. But when you transition to an automated environment, you have real-time visibility. So at any point in time, as Sonja mentioned, she can pull up a dashboard view and see when someone's working extra or working late. And at the end of the day, the child nutrition department is the one more aware of what is appropriate to be funded through their program and what overtime is appropriate as well. I know, I heard many times around, a grocery truck could run late, which could cause the manager to stay late. Well, at the end of the day, it's child nutrition that's more aware of those things versus the school. So I think what Sonja and team did is definitely good as you look at, everything we've talked about, from accountability and transparency to the manual versus automation. It all ties together and makes sense. So thanks for sharing. So as you've heard, automation proves to be valuable to districts, not only to ensure compliance, but it provides the necessary tools to be more accurate in labor allocation to federal dollars. We all know that budgets are tight these days, and having a system in place to more accurately and effectively track those labor dollars is critical. I mentioned earlier, as you transition to an automated system, there's almost a guarantee that you're going to see some level of savings around tracking the actual hours worked. So thanks, Jonathan and Sonja, for sharing. So we're going to transition now to our last topic of the day, reporting and auditing. We've discussed all the various funding types that school districts leverage, as well as the reasons for automation. So as we think about reporting and auditing as our last topic of the day, I think it's important to think about, and it's again provides the tool to the district, whether you're a principal or district administrator, to ensure that you're tracking and being able to report on it, see trends, et cetera, which is not anything that district administrators are able to do pretty much when you're on paper, because you're more in a react type mode versus proactive type mode. So when thinking about spending federal dollars, no matter the source, it's important that you have a solution in place that provides proper reporting and auditing. It's also important that you establish a process for which your time and attendance information speaks directly to your financials or your ERP system, which we know at the end of the day is where it gets charged and paid out. So when we think about our solution, and just to give you an idea of reporting, as both Jonathan and Sonja have mentioned, very slick dashboards where you're able to pull the data you need, as Sonja mentioned, specific to some of her special activity or funds or programs that she's running. You can create dashboards specific for that. You can have a graphical depiction of what's going on to identify trends or outliers. Is there a particular school that has excessive overtime or comp time? That's not anything that you really have visibility into on paper. So our solution allows for, the reporting and visibility into things so that you can be more proactive in your approach. So when we think about that, at Wicomico, Jonathan does just that with the Kronos and ERP solution. Having annual audits, Wicomico wants to ensure they have easily accessible reporting and audits to provide the transparency and accountability that we've already talked about, and the information necessary during those times. So if your audit is for a particular period of time, you need to have easy access and be able to pull it easily versus having to track it down, make copies, etc. So, Jonathan, can you elaborate on your process for us as it relates to reporting and auditing?
Sure. Like Rob said, audited every year by our independent auditors, every other year by our State Department, and every 6 years by yet another State Department called the Office of Legislative Auditors. And all of these auditors are typically given from the get-go a GL report from our ERP system. That's right. That's step one. From that, transactions are selected and tested as part of their substantive testing. Obviously, payroll transactions are always included in the sample. I've never seen where there haven't been. And auditors demand conclusive evidence to formulate their assertions. We all know this to be true. And when we're talking about allocability, what that means is the program must derive benefit proportional to cost. So in my experience, there's no more conclusive evidence than demonstrating when employees actually swiped their badge. And in some cases, we have some set up to click the button at their workstation computer. So if you couple the swiping and clicking info data with reports that demonstrate a supervisor, with firsthand knowledge of the employee's activity, supervisor's approval, then in my opinion, there isn't much left for an auditor to want. That's satisfying them. It should satisfy them. It is what it is at that point. We're showing them everything. All of this, of course, the process presupposes sound and implemented internal controls, obviously. But for me, using Kronos kind of boils down to the amount of time my staff and I have to spend, like I said, satisfying these auditors. And Kronos enables the efficiency seen elsewhere with our ERP system. So thankfully in our ERP system, I can click on, for instance, supplies and materials expenditure and provide a scanned copy of a Staples receipt. Likewise, I can do the same thing right from our GL, the system I know and love, and provide this payroll data. And that's because of Kronos interfaces with our ERP system.
Great, thanks for sharing. So if we shift gears to child nutrition, we know professional standards and labor allocation requirements are at the forefront of child nutrition directors' minds. So Sonja, can you speak to that for us as it relates to child nutrition?
Yes, similar to what Jonathan was mentioning, we too are heavily audited. Matter of fact, we just had a recent audit, which I'm pleased to say we passed everything, but we had a recent audit back in December, and one of the things that they look at are our meals per labor hour. We would not be able to do that with as much accuracy utilizing the paper as opposed to what that's going to automate it. We're able to pull additional data in conjunction with assistance from our payroll department of information that we need for or needed for the audit team. But in addition to that, it also lends us the ability to determine the efficiency of a site. So if we are overstaffed, and anyone who's familiar with child nutrition, our staffing is based upon participation. And in essence, if we're not feeding the children, then obviously the labor hours allocated are not consistent with the meals or the output that we have. So if that ever occurs by us in conjunction with the automated system and utilizing the data, the dollar value data from the GL or from the budget analysis, we're able to determine if we have to make any modifications to the timelines of when employees would report to work. Now, mind you, they're contracted for a certain time period, so we do not deal with the contracted hours per se, but simply modify when they work so that we're more efficient with that. And with the reviews, they will observe that as well. But in addition to that, a couple of years ago, child nutrition programs were required to handle professional training or professional standards. By having the automated system, we were able to look or monitor or print out data to provide to whomever should ask for it at that time, as well as ourselves, those employees who have participated in the training sessions that we've had, because we're able to generate a report with the employee's name, the time period that they were in that session, and we utilize that as support documentation for our professional standards records. The labor allocations also allow us, as I mentioned previously, to determine our staffing levels. Prior to that, we had to take the paper document and do a little bit of magic to determine how many hours were actually expended, and as I mentioned earlier, sometimes that data was not accurate because we had persons who were just utilizing repetitive time. And as I said, I know for a fact Susie did not come every day at 7:30 and leave every day at 1:30. So that was very inaccurate. There's improved accuracy utilizing the automated system for the aspects of what we need when we have to do our labor allocations and our labor studies, which is another thing that we will do to determine if we need to move a staff member from one school within a feeder pattern to another site within that feeder pattern to make sure that we're meeting the standards set forth by our State Department as it relates to the meals per labor hour or the standard staffing for a facility. So it's been most helpful giving us that data.
Great. Thanks for sharing. So as you all can imagine, reporting and auditing proves to be important when leveraging federal dollars due to all the requirements associated, as Sonja and Jonathan have outlined. So developing a process on the front end helps solidify a solid solution on the back end, as Sonja just alluded to. So reporting allows district administrators, as I mentioned, to be proactive. They're able to manage in the moment, and while during audit season, provide the necessary information to ensure compliance. So thanks for sharing around that topic. So that concludes our topics for today. Thanks again to Wicomico Public Schools and Jonathan Bailey, as well as Jefferson County Schools and Sonja Anthony from Child Nutrition for sharing their experience and stories with us today. Now I'm going to open it up for questions. Any questions from the audience? Looks like I do have a few coming in. Jonathan, I have one for you. How do you handle split-funded, full-time, benefited staff?
Oh, sure. Well, first, I think we should all affirm the truth that split-funded FTEs does not necessarily mean multi-cost objectives. And as a district, we are very intentional about avoiding the appearance of multi-cost objectives, even for our split-funded folks. Kronos helps with that quite simply, just like an employee charge 100%. We can put in say a general fund, local funds account number, some applicable percentage, and then, for instance, a Title I number, and it tracks them separately. And we substantiate or document time and effort with a semi-annual certification that we print. Kronos helps with that. So it's really no different. It's very simple. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Great.
I had another one come in for Sonja. What do you feel is the ultimate benefit of an automated solution within your department?
The ultimate benefit that we're experiencing is because we have hourly employees, we're able to monitor their time and not have any issues regarding excessive overtime or wages that are not being paid or reported. So we were able to see if there was over-reporting, resulting in improprieties in the wage and hour laws, or if in fact the employees were not getting the time that was due them by working off the clock, which is something we do not wish for any employee, regardless of what entity they work in the school system. But it's allowed us basically to utilize that data, that automated information, to make sure that we are in compliance with wage and hour laws.
Great, thank you. We have a general one that I think I can probably answer, not directed at anybody in particular, but would it be feasible to bring this program on for the child nutrition department only if the rest of the district did not use? And I know with Sonja and Jonathan, they did a district-wide deployment, but I can definitely speak to the fact that while it's, as you can imagine, beneficial to do the whole district, there is nothing holding you back from doing just the child nutrition department. We've had several districts that saw the value and experience the pains and everything that Sonja's talked about. So that can definitely be the stepping stone within your district to automation, is starting with the child nutrition department, seeing the value, and moving it district-wide, or just utilizing it in the child nutrition department. So we've had success in doing subsets of employees such as child nutrition or transportation. So definitely is feasible and something that we can discuss. Looks like we got a couple more. One directed at me. Are there other types of employees that could be tracking their time using an automated system besides those paid through federal funds? So most definitely, as I mentioned just now, I guess what most districts are doing today versus maybe 10, 15 years ago is they are deploying our solution district-wide to even include teachers. And so definitely, just because you're federally funded doesn't mean there's not value in utilizing our system. Our focus today was just federal programs, but I will say districts now are deploying our solution district-wide to have teachers more accountable, just to account for their day by one punch, as simple as that. But then they're also able to allocate their extra duty and supplemental pay, as we've alluded to today. We're able to track FMLA and things like that on the teachers in our system as well. So there's definite value in that. So I will have to say what's becoming the norm is deploying a time and attendance solution district-wide. Looks like we have one more question. Does Kronos have focused solutions for school districts? So we've talked a lot about K-12. As Andrew mentioned, I focus on all things K-12 here at Kronos. But one of the exciting things is as we have become more mature from a K-12 perspective and developed a K-12 focused team, in conjunction with that, we have released a K-12 solution as well that encompasses all the best practices that not only we spoke about today, but we just scratched the surface focusing on child nutrition and federal dollars. But when you think about a district-wide deployment, all the best practices and things that you have unique in a school district, from multi-calendars to employees working multi-contract hours to weather days that occur where you may dismiss early or delay school. There's so many factors and so many unique things that occur within a school district. So we've developed a focused solution that encompasses what we see across the U.S. in K-12, and what that allows us to do is to deploy a solution that on average is 80 to 85% complete from the start, and then we're able to do a gap analysis of, okay, how does Wicomico differ from Jefferson? Wicomico may have unions that has particular overtime rules versus Jefferson not having any unions, etc. And so we're able to more rapidly get the solution up and running for school districts and leverage best practices that we've learned from people like Jonathan and Sonja as we have worked with school districts across the country. So very exciting times for us at Kronos and for K-12. Looks like another question came in. If currently using a paper system, what needs to be set up to implement Kronos? So I think I kind of just answered that, but really at the end of the day, if you're focused just on child nutrition or district-wide deployment, we got our best practices solution that we bring forward right out of the gate. So once you sign up for Kronos, we do the fit gap analysis that I mentioned. We identify what employees are going to use Kronos. If it's just child nutrition, if it's the entire district, we identify what policies and procedures that you have in place that may be different. And honestly, I know for me, I thought we were different and did things different, but as I have had the opportunity to travel across the country, coast to coast, K-12 is K-12. And there are a few unique things that we see, but for the most part, very similar. So we bring forward that, do the gap analysis, and then able to move forward. And so from a setup perspective, there's not a lot that has to be done. The biggest thing is, depending on your ERP, is setting up that integration. But the nice thing is we've established standard integration with the main K-12 vendors out there that provide ERP solutions. And so we even have a starting point for that to make that seamless. So, the setup process for our solution is minimized now with our focus on K-12. And I think that is all of our questions. So again, thank you all for attending. On the screen here, you have my direct contact information. Don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have questions about anything. If you'd like to reach out to our presenters, Jonathan and Sonja, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have questions for them. I can definitely put you in contact with them. But thank you all for attending.
All right. Well, thank you, Rob. And unfortunately, that is all the time that we have left for today. So, as we wrap up, I want to thank all three of our presenters, Rob, Sonja, and Jonathan, for really an excellent discussion. And I'd also like to thank Kronos for its support today. And one final reminder that I mentioned at the beginning, we will be sending out an email to everyone who attended today when the recording of the webinar is ready. And thank you, and this concludes today's webcast. Goodbye.